Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the AM Report for HAPS News, the network of now. I'm Alex Mahajer. It is Wednesday, May 12th, and this morning, Congresswoman Liz Cheney has been ousted from House GOP leadership. She gave a defiant speech on the House floor last night, taking the GOP to task and Donald Trump to task for his election lie about the 2020 presidential election. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Gaza Israeli violence that's erupted, that's barreling towards a full-fledged war, the gas shortages across the eastern United States, and talk about the For the People Act, which advanced out of Senate committee hearings yesterday to the full U.S. Senate floor, and what we could expect out of that legislation. All of this and more this morning on the AM Report. Good morning, everyone. If you're watching on the HAPS app or website, click the award button. Let me know you're enjoying the broadcast, or just chime in like Renee Barone. Good morning, Renee. Good to see you. Let it be. Saying hello from Reno. Good to see you as well. And hola, buenos dias, says Lalo Chimay from watching from Facebook. Good to see you this morning. And if you're watching on Facebook, Reddit, YouTube, Twitter, leave a comment. Let me know what you're feeling as we get into some of today's top headlines, and we do have some headlines to cover at the top of the hour. Liz Cheney has been ousted from House GOP leadership. The House voted this morning to remove her as conference chair for her criticisms of Donald Trump and for the GOP's lies about the 2020 election. So on the eve of her ouster last night, Congresswoman Cheney took to the House floor in a very defiant speech to take Donald Trump and the GOP at large to task for emboldening the 2020 election lie, and refused to be silent about it, even as this is the reason that the House Republicans voted to remove her, because she wouldn't stay quiet about Trump's lies regarding the 2020 election. And she took the opportunity to get up and have her last say on the House floor and be about this very issue, something that she didn't need to do. And I don't care for Liz Cheney, and I don't care for her politics. She's extremely hyper conservative, and her political survival means absolutely nothing to me. But I've got to give it to her. This was a ballsy move. It was a courageous move, and it was actually a really beautiful speech talking about the need to protect our democracy. I have a few minutes of that for you. I thought that the speech was important enough that I'd give you a little bit of an extended look. But if you want to look up Liz Cheney's full remarks on the House floor last night, you should certainly do so. But here's Congresswoman Liz Cheney talking about why she's doing this.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank very much my friend, colleague, Mr. Buck, for yielding me time this evening. I know the topic, Mr. Speaker, is cancel culture. I have some thoughts about that, but tonight I rise to discuss freedom and our constitutional duty to protect it. Mr. Speaker, I have been privileged to see firsthand how powerful and how fragile freedom is. 28 years ago, I stood outside a polling place, a schoolhouse. God has blessed America, Mr. Speaker, but our freedom only survives if we protect it, if we honor our oath taken before God in this chamber to support and defend the Constitution, if we recognize threats to freedom when they arise. Today, we face a threat America has never seen before. A former president who provoked a violent attack on this Capitol in an effort to steal the election has resumed his aggressive effort to convince Americans that the election was stolen from him. He risks inciting further violence. Millions of Americans have been misled by the former president. They have heard only his words, but not the truth, as he continues to undermine our democratic process, sowing seeds of doubt about whether democracy really works at all. I am a conservative Republican, and the most conservative of conservative principles is reverence for the rule of law. The Electoral College has voted. More than 60 state and federal courts, including multiple judges the former president appointed, have rejected his claims. The Trump Department of Justice investigated the former president's claims of widespread fraud and found no evidence to support them. The election is over. That is the rule of law. That is our constitutional process. Those who refuse to accept the rulings of our courts are at war with the Constitution. Our duty is clear. Every one of us who has sworn the oath must act to prevent the unraveling of our democracy. This is not about policy. This is not about partisanship. This is about our duty as Americans. Remaining silent and ignoring the lie emboldens the liar. I will not participate in that. I will not sit back and watch in silence while others lead our party down a path that abandons the rule of law and joins the former president's crusade to undermine our democracy. As the party of Reagan, Republicans have championed democracy, won the Cold War, and defeated the Soviet communists. Today, America is on the cusp of another Cold War, this time with communist China. Attacks against our democratic process and the rule of law empower our adversaries and feed communist propaganda that American democracy is a failure. We must speak the truth. Our election was not stolen, and America has not failed. I received a message last week from a Gold Star father who said, "Standing up for the truth honors all who gave all." We must all strive to be worthy of the sacrifice of those who have died for our freedom.
That's Congresswoman Liz Cheney on the eve of her ouster last night. And of course, House Republican Conference voted to remove her this morning. She will likely be replaced by New York Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who's a Trump loyalist who does cast aspersions over the 2020 election. And altogether, she just got Liz Cheney just got shivved. And you know, there's a commenter. I don't support her, but I do support standing up for what you believe in, even if you stand alone. Like I said, I believe that her speech was deeply courageous. I don't at all agree with her politics, and her political survival means nothing to me personally. But I appreciated her commitment to democracy and her seeing the long game here, which is casting doubt over the outcome of the 2020 election because it serves your personal or political interests, is harmful to our democracy, and that emboldens our adversaries like Russia, like China, whose singular goals really are to break up, or at least topmost, one of their foremost goals is to break up Western democracy because it's bad for their business. So altogether, just a spectacular display of hypocrisy out of the GOP, which has been screaming about cancel culture. I'll note that Liz Cheney's remarks last night were during a session of the House that the topic was cancel culture, as the GOP is canceling one of their own for doing something that they don't like, for speaking a truth that they don't like. Hello from Colorado, Peter Bittner. Good to see you. And hello, Pablo from LA. And let's see, this commenter from Facebook, Cora, God will bless her for her stand. The GOP has not been standing for God. They are now standing for God enemies, Satan, satanic tasks, blocking what is godly and holy. They have Trump, their God. I don't know about that, but I do know that they have made Trump like they're a false idol that they're worshiping at the altar of Trump at this point. Their 2020 campaign platform, the 2020 presidential election campaign platform, GOP platform, was "We support Donald Trump." One sentence. That was it. They didn't run on a platform. They don't have a platform. They don't have any ideas. Their ideas right now are Trump, the election was stolen, block black people from voting, and let's hurt trans people. That's what the GOP stands for today. So in other news, Israel has been launching an offensive on the Gaza Strip. Israeli Gaza violence has erupted and is now the worst conflict since 2014 between the two states the death toll has risen as airstrikes and rocket fire between Israel and Hamas have escalated. The UN Middle East envoy is warning that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is escalating towards a full-fledged war. As of today, the Gaza Health Ministry said the death toll in Gaza had reached 48, including 14 children, with more than 300 wounded. Meanwhile, 6 people in Israel have been killed. It's not exactly clear why Israel has launched this offensive on the Gaza Strip. We do know that, of course, Israel is an American ally, and the Biden administration needs to walk a fine line between standing up for what may be a humanitarian crisis and an aggressive act towards Hamas by Israel and managing our interests with an ally. And some of the video footage coming out from Hamas has been really sort of troubling. I want to give you guys a trigger warning. This is going to be some just quick video footage from a Palestinian resident who took some video of carpet bombs in the Gaza Strip. Here's a little bit of that.
لا إله إلا الله 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 لم يبق شيء يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا مغيث يا مغيث يا الله يا الله
And people online have been speculating that the translation to what the man is yelling is "There's nothing left to bomb." There was a there was a residential tower that was bombed that came down. There's video footage of that as well online. There have been civilians that have been killed, so it's not exactly clear why this aggression is happening, but we will keep our eyes on that as we hear that we may be escalating, Israel and Hamas may be escalating towards a full-fledged war, which is very, very concerning. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic United States is hoarding gasoline after a pipeline cyber attack is causing shortages. The Biden administration is taking some actions to ease that shortage. The cyber attack happened on the Colonial Pipeline last week, which is one of the largest fuel pipelines in the U.S. It was a ransomware attack, and the gasoline pipeline last week, therefore, had to be shut down for a time, and it's caused scattered shortages in fear of price spikes in the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast U.S. And because of that, people are hoarding gas, which is creating a high demand, not enough supply. The U.S. Department of Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm is this morning saying that it's not a supply shortage. We have plenty of fuel. It's that demand has spiked because people are getting jittery about the potential that they might not have enough gas. The whole thing is really and interesting, as the Biden administration has been speaking about the need to shift towards renewable energy sources and maybe our reliance on fossil fuels. It's a problematic reflection of our deep reliance on fossil fuels to survive here in the U.S. And here's Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm talking about this morning.
Reality check here. What kinds of shortages should Americans be bracing for? What kind of disruption on gas prices can Americans expect?
First, let me just be really clear. The crunch is in the areas that are affected by the pipeline, the main spurs of the pipeline. So that really is the Southeast. It's about 70% of the supplies of North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and especially Southern Virginia are impacted the most. And so those are the areas that we have the greatest concerns with. And because of the fact that there's not a whole lot of other supply. Now, this particular pipeline also supplies other states, but there are other pipelines that supply other states as well, so there's more diversity. In this particular region, that's where we're going to see the crunch. And this is why we know that we have gasoline, we just have to get it to the right places. And that's why these next couple of days, I think, will be challenging. And we want to encourage people. It's not that we have a gasoline shortage. It's that we have this supply crunch and that things will be back to normal soon, and that we're asking people not to hoard and know that we are all over this.
So that's Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm saying it's not a lack of supply, that there's plenty of supply, but that people are hoarding and it's causing a supply crunch. I'll also note that the gasoline demand has gone up so much on the East Coast, and really the Biden administration is therefore taking some actions like waivers of environmental and labor rules to ease gasoline shipments. And the pipeline has been closed for 5 days. Will eventually resume delivery and shipment of that fuel. And we need to move to renewable electricity. We shouldn't have such a reliance on fossil fuels. So if something like this happens, we shouldn't be left with panic in the streets. That people should have alternative and renewable electricity sources that are sustainable, that can't get hacked. And altogether, that we are easing some environmental restrictions is troubling. I assume those are temporary moves by the Biden administration, and things will get back to normal shortly. It's the 5th day of the shutdown of the pipeline, and what we're hearing is that there is enough fuel for at least the next week. So East Coasters, calm down. Mid-Atlantic and the South, calm down. Everything's going to be fine. Stop hoarding gas. The For the People Act has advanced out of committee in the U.S. Senate. It was in a committee hearing yesterday. This is a package of voting rights reforms, and it will now go to the full Senate for a vote on full passage. It advanced out of the Senate Rules Committee amidst universal opposition from Senate Republicans. The committee meeting was a clown show for Republicans to lodge bad faith attacks, particularly Senator Ted Cruz from Texas, who had a real stellar day yesterday. Really letting his just bad faith, dishonest propaganda spew, and he was taken to task a couple times for this. But it was really altogether kind of fascinating. Here's a little bit of Senator Ted Cruz's worst moments during these hearings yesterday. At one point, Amy Klobuchar, Senator who ran for president on the Democratic Party primary, took Ted Cruz to task for his opposition to this bill, saying, "You were one of the insurrectionists who denied the election, who voted against the Electoral College certification. And so, yeah, we're trying to protect democracy from people like you." And watch Ted Cruz's reaction, how rude and dismissive he is to Amy Klobuchar.
When in fact you, Senator Cruz, not all of your colleagues here today, you were contesting the Electoral College. You were leading, one of the leaders on the effort to say that the election results were not correct. And so you wonder why we want to make sure that people have the right to vote.
Yeah, you're right, Gina, 876-54321. Absolutely right. Cruz, Brene Barone commenting Cruz is a clown. And later on, Ted Cruz called the Democratic attempts to expand access to voting rights Jim Crow 2.0. The logic is impossible to follow, but here's that.
You know, I listened to the speeches this morning. I listened to Senator Schumer's speech, where he recounted this country's shameful history of Jim Crow laws. And he's right. Jim Crow laws were bigoted, racist, and disenfranchised millions of people. And it is worth remembering that those Jim Crow laws were drafted by Democrats, they were implemented by Democrats, and they kept Democrats in power. Now, today's talking point, repeated in the media, is that was the Democrats of yesterday, not today. Well, today the Democrats are doing it again. This legislation, to use a phrase that has been popularized on the media recently, is Jim Crow 2.0.
Anyone else following this logic? I don't know. I'm not. So by seeking to expand access to voting, Democrats are actually suppressing the black vote, like in the Jim Crow South. Not sure how he gets to that conclusion, says Cullen Reddy. That's because he doesn't believe his own premise. He doesn't believe the thing that he's arguing. He just launches bad faith attacks ad nauseum. Now, here's the thing. Regardless of this, Ted Cruz being by and large irrelevant and a waste of my life and time and space, this bill is going to die in the U.S. Senate because the U.S. Senate, and I've talked about this nearly daily, the U.S. Senate has an anti-democratic tool called the filibuster, which suppresses the majority vote by requiring that legislation pass with a 60-vote supermajority. And because of that, because Democrats are evenly split in the Senate, with Kamala Harris, vice president, being the tie-breaking vote, then nothing that's a non-budget related can get passed in the U.S. Senate unless the Democrats eliminate the filibuster or reform the filibuster. And there are a couple Democratic holdouts to the filibuster. Joe Manchin from West Virginia, Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona, being the Democrats who are holding up reforming or eliminating the filibuster, which is very popular. And the filibuster is also a relic of the Jim Crow South. The framers said that the filibuster is not constitutional. The U.S. Senate in and of itself is sort of an anti-democratic institution because it gives equal voting power to states like Wyoming that have very small populations and California, which have big populations, but they each have 2 votes in the U.S. Senate. The Democrats in the U.S. Senate represent 30 million more Americans than the Republicans do, and yet are being held up from passing the will of the majority because of this filibuster tool. So the Democrats are advancing this out of committee for a vote into the full U.S. Senate floor. That will be killed. It may pass with a majority, but it will die either way, because Democrats must reform or eliminate the filibuster in order to make this happen. I know that President Biden has called Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin to his office for one-on-one meetings, which I can only assume what those meetings would be about. And we'll see if there's any movement on this. But in order for this deeply important legislation to pass, to expand access to the ballot box in the face of over 300 pieces of anti-voting rights legislation that have been passed in Republican state legislatures or have been introduced in Republican state legislatures across the country since January, as the Republican Party is screaming that the election was stolen. It's going to be important to reform that filibuster in order to pass this legislation, which would preempt and mitigate a lot of the harmful impact of these statewide laws that are being passed. So incredibly important. This has been the AM Report for Haps News Network of Now. We're live every weekday morning with all of your quick political news and headlines to get your day started right. If you like this journalism, if you like this content, please consider sponsoring it and sponsoring independent journalism. You can do that at haps.tv/@Alex, where you can become a recurring monthly sponsor. You can sponsor the program, click the award button if you like, or click subscribe and get a notification when we go live every morning. Thank you, Renee, for the Stay Safe Award. Appreciate you. We'll be back tomorrow morning with all of your latest. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you all later. Bye-bye.